One of the most outspoken ministers in the New South Wales Liberal government is David Elliott. And on the weekend, he announced he's quitting politics at the next election after a factional dispute left him without a seat. So I wanted to catch up with him about that. But also, as a former police and prisons minister, I wanted to ask him about a United Nations delegation leaving Australia in a huff after not being able to inspect all the prisons they wanted to see. Really? Hasn't the UN got anything better to do? Listen to the United Nations whinge via the ABC this morning.
If an international body is not able to have access, then we also potentially in Australia have some issues about others being able to have unannounced access to places of deprivation of liberty.
Will there be repercussions for this?
For Australia, I mean, there are no,
Well, this mob call our prisons, by the way, places for the deprivation of liberty. And they say we might be breaking conventions against torture. It's just outrageous. And notice how the ABC doesn't challenge this. They just want punishment for Australia, their country. I asked David Elliott earlier about the UN claims that were in contravention of this agreement against torture.
Well, I say bollocks. I mean, when the UN was established after the Second World War, there was no suggestion that countries, sovereign nations, let alone sovereign states like we have in Australia, would surrender their right to manage law and order. That was certainly not the case. And I was the Corrections Minister for 4 years, and with the support of Mike Baird and Gladys Berejiklian, I refused to allow the Commonwealth to force UN inspectors upon us. I mean, we don't have a problem with torture in our jails here in New South Wales, and even if we did, we have so much oversight. And take it from me, having served in that seat for 4 years, there's plenty of oversight. We have an independent prisons inspector, we've got an ombudsman, we've got ICAC, we've got the police and the courts, all of which are very transparent. But I spoke to my New Zealand counterpart when I was the Minister for Corrections. They were telling me some terrible things that came about from New Zealand's signing off on that protocol, including being fined and warned because there wasn't enough butter on the bread for the prisoners, that flour boxes were too low, forcing prisoners to bend over too much to tend to them. And I said to the government at the time, the premiers at the time, this is not going to go down well. It's a vote of no confidence in the prison officers, the corrections officers, and I don't believe that we should be unnecessarily ceding sovereignty.
It's just the UN sticking their nose in where it's not wanted. They might do better to have a look at law and order and prisons in China or Saudi Arabia, or fill in another list of 50 countries before they try to start lecturing Australia. I want to have a look at the pandemic management too, because as a former police minister in New South Wales, you're at the pointy end of enforcing restrictions and border closures and God knows what else in New South Wales. Do you accept that the report we got last week, the Fault Lines report, when it says the lockdowns, the restrictions, the border closures all went way too far in Australia?
Well, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I wasn't on crisis cabinet, and as police minister, my job was to ensure the police had the political air cover to enforce what were health orders. They were health orders signed by the health minister and drafted by the department. So I, at the risk of sounding like I was just following orders, police had no role in drafting the health orders. That was for the health department, but we had to enforce them.
Okay, but just 2 points on that, David. Just 2 points. 2 points on that, David. Firstly, it's not a matter of hindsight. A lot of people, including myself and a lot of medical experts and others, were arguing against some of these rules and restrictions at the time. But secondly, yes, given that you as police minister and the police were enforcing the rules as they were declared by health orders and the like, do you accept that they went too far, that we had police clearing beaches, that we had police arresting people for not wearing masks? This was surely a low point. In fact, I remember you at one stage almost complaining, almost lamenting the fact that you were praising Australians for dobbing in their neighbours.
This was a once-in-a-century pandemic. We were seeing figures coming from overseas and indeed domestically that were frightening government. We saw multiple deaths in Italy and other jurisdictions around the world. So I will certainly finish my political career with my hand on my heart saying we did what we believed was right at the time. Did I like it? No. I mean, Chris, you know, I was a former executive of the Australian Hotels Association. I couldn't get the pubs open quick enough. And I thought that there was some serious mental health issues at risk with these lockdowns. And I think we probably might have dodged a bullet with that, although I was speaking to a principal yesterday who said that she's still got issues being addressed by kindergarten and first class kids that came to school after the pandemic and were just like blobs. They had no social skills. So yeah, there was no joy in us enforcing those rules. Certainly not from the police his point of view, and that's why the commissioner, the then Commissioner Mick Fuller, said to us that he will personally review every fine.
All right, now you're Transport Minister, plenty happening in that space in New South Wales, but you're leaving politics at next year's state election, along with many senior colleagues. You, though, want to stay and fight. You reckon there's plenty of work to be done, but it's just factional dealings that have done you in?
Yeah, my seat was abolished, Chris, and I mean, whenever there's a redistribution, it's like playing dice. You've just got to wait and see what the Electoral Commission comes up with. My seat was abolished. The majority of it went into the old seat of Castle Hill, and the majority of the old seat of Castle Hill went into the new seat of Kellyville. I lost a little bit North Rocks, the great people of North Rocks, that's going into the new seat of Epping. So, you know, it's a Democratic Party. I spoke to a few of the branches, and it was quite clear that they wanted somebody from the more conservative side of the Liberal Party. I don't know what you've got to do. I mean, as I said this morning, I don't think that I don't trust anybody more right wing than me. But if they want to, if they think that my brand of conservatism isn't to their flavour, to their liking, well then I've just got to accept reality, political reality. And there's a lot of things that are unfair in this world, and there is particularly a lot of things that are unfair in politics. But mate, I think I might have used all my 9 lives, and I might have even used one of yours. So I'm just going to accept the fact that you know, there are always going to be winners and losers.
David, we'll talk to you again before the election, no doubt. But thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Always a pleasure.